I'm Megan, 32, and I just discovered my brand new SUV has over $4,500 in damage that nobody bothered to tell me about. 3 days ago, I reluctantly loaned my car to my parents so they could take my sister Haley and her kids to an amusement park for the weekend. When they returned it, they acted completely normal, thanked me, and left. It wasn't until this morning that I noticed the massive dent in the rear bumper, scratched paint, and cracked taillight. The worst part? The dashcam footage I just watched shows exactly who's responsible and why they all conspired to hide it from me. If you've ever felt like the responsible one in your family who always gets taken advantage of, this story might hit close to home. Before I dive into how this family betrayal unfolded and the unexpected way it finally forced us to address years of favoritism, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Has your family ever hidden something important from you? Hit subscribe if you want more stories about standing up for yourself, even when it's against your own family. Trust me, the way this all plays out is something you won't want to miss. To understand why finding that damage hurts so much more than just financially, you need to know about my family dynamic. I'm an accountant at a mid-sized firm in Portland. I've always been careful with money, setting budgets, planning for the future, and living within my means. After 5 years of saving, I finally purchased my dream car 6 months ago, a Toyota Highlander in midnight blue. It was the first major purchase I'd made solely for myself, not to help someone else. My sister Haley is 3 years younger than me at 29. She's been the golden child in our family for as long as I can remember. While I was expected to maintain perfect grades, help around the house, and start working part-time jobs at 16, Haley was praised for C+ report cards and excused from most responsibilities because she was the creative one or too free-spirited for routine. This pattern continued into adulthood. Haley dropped out of community college after our parents paid her full tuition. She's had 7 different jobs in the past 5 years, none lasting more than 8 months. She's a single mom to twins, Aiden and Emma, who are 8 years old. The kids are sweet, but often undisciplined, because Haley's parenting style consists mostly of being their friend rather than setting boundaries. My parents, Richard and Barbara, have always made excuses for Haley. Dad is a retired high school teacher, and Mom works part-time at a local library. They're in their mid-60s now, but their tendency to bail Haley out hasn't diminished with age. When Haley can't pay her rent, they cover it. When she needs a babysitter last minute, they drop everything. When she makes a mistake, they rush to minimize it or shift blame elsewhere. Your sister just feels things more deeply, Mom would tell me, when we were teenagers and Haley's dramatic outbursts got her out of trouble. She needs more support than you do. You've always been so independent. Being labeled the responsible one meant I was expected to forgive, understand, and accommodate Haley's behavior. I can't count how many times I've heard the phrase, "just be the bigger person" from my parents. The car lending issue has been a recurring problem. In college, Haley borrowed my old Honda Civic and returned it with an empty gas tank and fast food wrappers scattered throughout. When I asked her to clean it, she rolled her eyes and said I was being uptight. 3 years ago, she borrowed my previous car for a weekend and returned it with a mysterious stain on the passenger seat that she never explained or offered to clean. So when my parents called last Wednesday asking to borrow my new SUV for the weekend trip to Enchanted Kingdom amusement park with Haley and the twins, I hesitated. They insisted their sedan was too small for everyone to be comfortable on the 3-hour drive, and they promised to be careful. After much deliberation, I agreed, but with clear conditions. No eating in the car, return it with a full tank of gas, and most importantly, Haley was not to drive it under any circumstances. My parents readily agreed to these terms, and I handed over the keys Friday morning before work. "We really appreciate this, Megan," Dad said. "We'll take good care of it, I promise." When they returned Sunday evening, everything seemed fine at first glance. My parents thanked me, mentioned they had a wonderful time, and quickly headed home. Haley texted me a brief thanks for the car message with a thumbs-up emoji. I checked the gas gauge, it was full, and went to bed feeling relieved that everything had gone smoothly for once. If only I had walked around the entire vehicle that night. Monday morning started like any other workday. I grabbed my coffee, put on my jacket, and headed out to my car at 7:30 a.m. As I approached from the front, everything looked normal. It wasn't until I was putting my laptop bag in the trunk that I noticed something off about the rear bumper. At first, I thought it was just a shadow, or maybe dirt from the road trip. But as I moved closer, my stomach dropped. A large dent occupied the right side of the bumper, accompanied by several deep scratches in the midnight blue paint that extended up to the rear quarter panel. The tail light on that side was cracked, with a piece of red plastic missing entirely. This wasn't minor damage, this was significant. I stood there in disbelief, my mind racing. How could they return my car in this condition, without saying a single word? How could they look me in the eye, thank me for lending them my vehicle, and not mention that it had been damaged? I circled the entire SUV, checking for any additional issues. The rest of the car appeared untouched, but the rear damage was impossible to miss. It looked like someone had backed into something solid, hard. My hands shaking slightly, I tried calling my dad first, straight to voicemail. Then my mom. Same result. Finally, I tried Haley, not really expecting her to answer at this hour, and she didn't. I left voicemails for all three, keeping my voice calm but firm, asking them to call me back immediately regarding damage to my car. I was going to be late for work, but this couldn't wait. I sent a quick email to my boss, explaining I'd be delayed due to a personal emergency. Then I remembered the dashcam. 6 months ago, when I bought the SUV, I had a front and rear dashcam system installed as a precaution for insurance purposes. The cameras were discreet, small black devices mounted near the rearview mirror and on the rear window, and I hadn't mentioned them to my family. The dashcam saved footage to a memory card that I could access through my phone, but I needed to be at my laptop to download and view longer recordings. I drove to work carefully, hyper-aware of the damage to my car, and rushed to my desk. During my lunch break, I closed my office door and connected the dashcam's memory card to my computer. The system recorded whenever the car was in motion and stored the footage in dated folders. I quickly found the weekend files and began scrolling through hours of highway driving. Nothing unusual appeared until Saturday afternoon, approximately 4:30 p.m., according to the timestamp. The rear camera showed the car backing up in what looked like a gas station. From the angle, I could see Haley was driving, already breaking rule number 1. She was looking down at her phone while reversing, completely distracted. Then came the impact, a sickening crunch, as the rear of my SUV collided with a concrete pillar protecting the gas pumps. The audio captured Haley's startled curse, followed by her getting out to inspect the damage. The camera caught her walking around to the back, then putting her hands over her mouth. My parents appeared in frame, looking equally shocked. They huddled together, inspecting the damage, while the twins watched from inside the car. "Megan is going to kill me," Haley said, her voice crystal clear on the recording. "It's pretty bad," Dad acknowledged, running his hand over the dented bumper. "That's going to be expensive to fix." "Should we call her?" Mom asked, looking worried. There was a pause before Haley spoke again. "Why don't we just not tell her right away? She's always been uptight about her things. She can afford to fix it. Let's just not say anything." "I don't know, Haley," Dad hesitated. "That doesn't seem right." "Dad, she's going to freak out and ruin the whole weekend. You know how she gets about her precious car. Let's just enjoy our trip and maybe tell her later when she's calmed down." Mom sighed. "Maybe Haley's right. Megan did work herself up about lending us the car in the first place. Let's not spoil everyone's fun over an accident." "Fine," Dad finally agreed. "But we're going to have to tell her eventually." "Of course," Haley said quickly. "Just later. When the timing is better." They got back in the car and drove away, with Haley still behind the wheel. I watched in stunned silence as the footage continued, showing them arriving at the amusement park, then later returning to their hotel. Not once did they call me. Not once did anyone suggest taking responsibility right away. The later they spoke of never came. They returned my car damaged, said nothing, and went about their lives as if everything was fine. As I sat at my desk staring at the frozen image of my damaged car, I felt a mixture of emotions I couldn't fully process. Betrayal, anger, hurt. But mostly, I felt a cold clarity washing over me. This wasn't just about a car anymore. This was about years of being taken for granted, of being expected to accept less than I deserved because I was the responsible one. I closed my laptop, canceled my afternoon meetings, and headed home. It was time for a long overdue confrontation. I drove directly to my parents' house after leaving work, not bothering to call ahead. Their cars were in the driveway, and parked next to them was Haley's beat-up Corolla. Perfect. Everyone responsible was there. With the dashcam footage downloaded to my phone and my emotions barely in check, I rang the doorbell. Mom answered. Surprise, registering on her face. Megan, what are you doing here in the middle of the day? Her eyes darted nervously past me to my car in the driveway. I need to talk to you, Dad, and Haley, I said evenly. Is everyone here? Well, yes. But I walked past her into the living room where Dad was watching a baseball game, and Haley was sprawled on the couch scrolling through her phone, looking completely relaxed. The twins were playing a video game on the floor. A normal, pleasant family afternoon. As if nothing had happened. Megan? Dad looked up, confusion crossing his face. Everything okay, sweetheart? No, I said, remaining standing as everyone stared at me. Everything is not okay. I have a question for all of you. Haley sat up straighter, suddenly alert. Mom hovered nervously by the doorway. What happened to my car this weekend? I asked, looking at each of them in turn. The silence that followed was deafening. Dad cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. Mom fidgeted with her sleeve. Haley's eyes darted to our parents before settling back on me. What do you mean? Haley finally asked, her voice artificially light. Nothing happened to your car. Try again, I said, pulling out my phone. I found the damage to the rear bumper this morning. Over $4,000 worth of damage. The taillight is cracked, the bumper is dented, and the paint is scratched all along the back. And not one of you thought to mention it? Dad shifted in his seat. Now, Megan, I'm sure it's not as bad as all that. It's exactly as bad as all that. I cut him off. I've already gotten an estimate. Well, accidents happen, Mom interjected. I'm sure no one meant any harm. So you knew? I turned to her. You all knew and decided not to tell me? Megan, you're being so materialistic right now, Haley said with a dramatic sigh. It's just a car. It can be fixed. Just a car? I repeated incredulously. The car I saved for 5 years to buy? The car I specifically asked you not to drive, Haley? Her eyes widened slightly. How did you know I was driving? I held up my phone. Dashcam. I saw and heard everything. The accident. The conversation afterward. The decision to hide it from me. Everything. The color drained from Haley's face. Dad looked down at his hands. Mom pressed her fingers to her temples. You recorded us without telling us? Haley quickly pivoted to outrage. That's an invasion of privacy. It's a dashcam, Haley. For insurance purposes. And thank goodness I had it, or you all would have continued lying to my face. Now, Megan, Dad started, using his mediator voice. I understand you're upset. Maybe we should have said something right away. That's on us. But it's really not as big a deal as you're making it out to be. Not a big deal? I was incredulous. You let Haley drive my car after I explicitly asked you not to. She damaged it while texting and driving. Then you all conspired to hide it from me. In what world is that not a big deal? I think you're overreacting, Mom said. Family is more important than material possessions, Megan. This isn't about the car. I finally raised my voice. This is about respect, about honesty, about treating me like my feelings and boundaries matter. Here we go again. Haley rolled her eyes. Always the victim, always so perfect. Making me look bad in front of Mom and Dad. Making you look bad? I stared at her in disbelief. You did that all by yourself when you decided to lie. I'll help with some of the cost, Dad offered, clearly trying to defuse the situation. Maybe a few $100s? The damage estimate was $4,500. His offer was insulting. I can't do this right now, I said, shaking my head and backing toward the door. I can't believe after all these years, you still don't get it. This isn't about money. This is about how you treat me versus how you treat Haley. It always has been. That's not fair, Mom protested weakly. Isn't it? I asked. Would you have hidden something like this if I had damaged Haley's car? Would you be telling her she's overreacting? No one had an answer for that. I turned and walked out, ignoring their calls for me to come back and discuss this reasonably. There was nothing reasonable about being gaslit by my own family. As I drove home, I felt something shift inside me. For years, I'd accepted their treatment as normal, thinking that's just how families were. But seeing the dashcam footage, hearing them so casually decide that my feelings didn't matter, had finally broken something loose. I was done being the family doormat. This time, they would face consequences. The confrontation at my parents' house stirred up memories I'd tried to suppress for years. As I drove home, scenes from throughout my childhood played in my mind like my own personal dashcam footage, only these recordings had been running for decades. I remembered when I was 8 and Haley was 5. She took my favorite stuffed animal, a panda named Mr. Bean that my grandmother had given me before she passed away, and cut off its ears with safety scissors because she wanted to give him a haircut. When I cried to my parents, Dad patted my head and said, "She's just little, Megan. She didn't mean it. You're a big girl, you can understand that. No consequences for Haley. No replacement for Mr. Bean. Just expectations that I should forgive and forget." In middle school, I won first place in the district science fair with a project on water filtration. My parents attended but spent most of the ceremony talking about how Haley might feel left out since she hadn't entered the competition. They took us out for ice cream afterward, not to celebrate my win, but to make sure Haley didn't feel bad about it. High school brought more blatant favoritism. Haley borrowed my favorite sweater without asking and returned it with a large bleach stain. It was an accident. My mother defended her when I got upset. Besides, you have so many nice clothes, and Haley doesn't have as many. The fact that I had more clothes because I worked part-time at a local cafe while Haley spent her allowance on concert tickets somehow didn't factor into their equation. Then came college. Despite having saved some money from my high school job, I still needed to work 30 hours a week while taking a full course load to cover tuition and expenses. My parents contributed what they could, about $1,000 per semester. Meanwhile, Haley got accepted to a more expensive private college, and my parents somehow found enough money to cover her full tuition. "Your sister isn't as academically gifted as you," they explained. "She needs this opportunity more." Haley dropped out after 3 semesters. Family events always revolved around Haley's schedule. If she couldn't make it to a planned dinner, we rescheduled even if I had already arranged time off work. If she arrived 2 hours late to a family gathering, we waited to eat. If she forgot someone's birthday, my parents would add her name to their card or gift. "You know your sister," they'd say with indulgent smiles. "She's just not good with dates." When I graduated college with honors in accounting, my parents attended the ceremony, but left early because Haley called with a crisis that turned out to be a flat tire. AAA could have handled it, but they insisted on driving 2 hours to help her, missing my department's reception. A month later, when Haley completed a 2-week photography workshop, they threw her a surprise party. "We're just so proud of her for finishing something," Mom whispered to me at that party, as if completing a short workshop deserved more celebration than my 4-year degree. I've been the family's safety net in more ways than one. When Haley needed money for rent 3 years ago because she'd spent her paycheck on a spontaneous weekend trip to Miami, I loaned her $800 that was never repaid. When she needed a babysitter for the twins because she'd double-booked herself for a date, I canceled my plans. When she got into a fender bender with her previous car, I drove her to work for 2 weeks. The most hurtful comments often came from my parents. "You're the responsible one, Megan. You don't need as much attention." As if my stability was a reason to take me for granted rather than something to appreciate. "Haley just feels things more deeply than you do." As if my emotions were somehow less valid because I didn't express them as dramatically. "We don't worry about you like we worry about your sister." as if their lack of concern was a compliment rather than a painful reminder that I wasn't a priority. Every time I tried to address the favoritism, I was dismissed. "You're just being sensitive," Dad would say. "Families aren't supposed to keep score," Mom would add, conveniently ignoring that in their scorekeeping, Haley always won. The car situation was just the latest example in a lifelong pattern, but somehow seeing it so clearly on video, hearing their casual dismissal of my feelings, made something finally click. I had been enabling this behavior for years by always being the reasonable one, the forgiving one, the one who wouldn't make waves. As I pulled into my driveway, I realized that my resentment had been building for decades. The damaged bumper on my car was really just the physical manifestation of the emotional damage our family dynamic had caused. And for the first time, I was ready to do something about it. If you've ever been labeled the responsible one in your family, you know how that becomes both a badge and a burden. Expected to forgive, to understand, to be the bigger person. Has your family ever justified treating you differently than your siblings? Let me know in the comments if any of this sounds familiar. I never expected my car's dashcam would capture more than just the accident. It revealed the truth about our family dynamics I'd been trying not to see for years. Keep watching to find out how I finally decided to stand up for myself. The morning after the confrontation, I called in sick to work. With everything going on, I knew I wouldn't be able to focus anyway. Instead, I spent the day getting estimates for my car repairs. My first stop was the Toyota dealership where I'd purchased the SUV. The service manager, Dan, inspected the damage carefully, taking photos from multiple angles. "The impact damaged more than just the bumper," he explained, pointing to an area I hadn't noticed. "There's damage to one of the parking sensors, and the structure behind the bumper needs to be checked for integrity. We're looking at $4,725 for a complete repair." I felt sick. Almost $5,000 for an accident that shouldn't have happened in the first place. "Could I get a second opinion?" I asked, hoping it might be less elsewhere. "Sure," Dan nodded sympathetically. "I'd recommend Garcia's Auto Body on Westfield Street. They do good work, and they're usually a bit cheaper than dealership prices." I thanked him and took the written estimate. 2 hours later, I was at Garcia's getting a second opinion from Miguel, the owner. His assessment was similar. "The bumper needs to be replaced entirely," he confirmed. "And these newer models have sensors and cameras that add to the cost. I can do it for $4,280, but that's as low as I can go while still using OEM parts." My third stop was Value Auto Repair, a place known for more budget-friendly options. Their estimate came in at $3,950, but they would use aftermarket parts that might affect my warranty. All three places confirmed what I already knew. This was an expensive repair that would significantly impact my finances. Even if I went through insurance, I had a $1,000 deductible, and my rates would likely increase for the next 3 years. Either way, this accident was going to cost me. I was sitting in my car outside Value Auto, reviewing the estimates, when my phone rang. It was my dad. "Megan," he started, sounding conciliatory. "I've been thinking about the car situation. I want to help. How about I contribute $500 toward the repairs?" $500. After they let Haley drive my car against my wishes, hid the damage, and then tried to make me feel bad for being upset about it. $500 when the repair would cost nearly 9 times that amount. "The estimate is over $4,000, Dad," I said flatly. "4,000? He sounded genuinely shocked. "That can't be right. It's just a little dent. I have estimates from 3 different places. It's not just a dent. The bumper needs to be replaced, along with the sensor. The taillight is cracked. There's structural damage that needs to be assessed." "Well," he hesitated, "that's all I can afford right now. Maybe Haley can contribute something too." "Have you asked her to?" I already knew the answer. "She's going through a tough time financially. You know how it is." Yes, I knew exactly how it was. Haley was always going through a tough time financially, usually right after making a completely unnecessary large purchase. As if on cue, my phone pinged with a text from Haley as soon as I hung up with Dad. I expected an apology, or at least some acknowledgement of responsibility. Instead, I got, Sorry you're so upset about a little scratch on your car. Some of us have real problems to deal with. A little scratch. That's how she characterized $4,500 worth of damage that she'd caused while breaking multiple promises. Classic Haley. Out of morbid curiosity, I opened Instagram and checked her profile. There she was, posting from earlier that same day, shopping bags in hand, outside an expensive boutique, new highlights in her hair, captioned, "Treating myself because I deserve it. Self-care retail therapy." The timestamp showed she'd posted it just an hour before sending me that dismissive text. I scrolled through her recent posts and saw several expensive purchases from the past 2 weeks: designer shoes, a new iPhone, tickets to a concert, all while being too broke to contribute to fixing my car that she had damaged. Then I remembered something Dad had mentioned during our last family dinner 2 weeks ago. He and Mom had loaned Haley $5,000 to help with essential bills after she fell behind on rent. $5,000 that would have more than covered my car repair. As I sat there staring at my phone, a voicemail notification appeared. It was my mother. "Megan, honey, I think you're blowing this whole car thing out of proportion. Yes, there should have been more honesty about what happened, but it's just a material possession. Family is what matters. Call me back when you're feeling less emotional about this." Less emotional. As if my feelings weren't valid. As if expecting basic honesty and responsibility from my family was asking too much. I did some quick mental math, adding up all the financial help my parents had given Haley over just the past year that I knew about. $2,000 for a security deposit on her apartment, $1,500 when she decided to take a mental health break from work and couldn't make her car payment, the recent $5,000 for bills, plus countless smaller amounts for the twins' activities, groceries when she ran short, and gas money when she was between paychecks. The total was well over $15,000 in a single year, money freely given, with no expectation of repayment. Meanwhile, I was being offered $500 toward a repair that wasn't my fault, with the clear implication that I should be grateful for even that much. I realized then that I had been enabling this behavior just as much as my parents had. By always being understanding, by never pushing back hard enough, by accepting their justifications and excuses, I had helped create this dynamic where Haley wasn't held accountable and I wasn't treated fairly. Something had to change, and it needed to start with me. The evening after collecting repair estimates, I called my best friend Laura and asked if I could come over. Laura and I had been friends since college, and she had witnessed the Haley drama firsthand over the years. She was one of the few people who understood my family dynamic without me having to explain it. "They did what?" Laura exclaimed when I showed her the dashcam footage. We were sitting on her couch, sharing a bottle of wine and the last 8 years of built-up frustration. "And then they had the nerve to act like I'm overreacting," I finished, taking a large sip from my glass. Laura shook her head in disbelief. "Megan, I love you, but you've been letting them walk all over you for years. It's time to stop." "I know," I admitted. "But they're my family. What am I supposed to do?" "Treat them like you would anyone else who damaged your property and lied about it," she said simply. "Hold them accountable." For the next 2 hours, we outlined a plan. First, I would schedule a family dinner at my parents' house for Sunday evening, 5 days away. This would give everyone time to cool down and give me time to prepare. "You need evidence," Laura insisted. "Not just of the car damage, but of the pattern." She was right. I needed to show that this wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a lifelong pattern of favoritism and unequal treatment. I spent the next evening compiling evidence. Photos of the car damage from multiple angles, screenshots of all 3 repair estimates, and a complete copy of the dashcam footage showing both the accident and the subsequent cover-up conversation. Then I did something I'd never done before. I created a spreadsheet documenting the financial disparity in how my parents treated Haley and me. I listed every significant financial gift or loan they'd given her that I could remember, alongside what they'd given me in the same time periods. I included the emotional costs, too. Family events rescheduled for her convenience, celebrations of her minor accomplishments versus their muted reactions to my major ones, times when my boundaries were ignored while hers were respected. Looking at it all laid out so clearly was both validating and heartbreaking. The pattern was undeniable. Laura suggested I consult with her brother Mark, who was an attorney, about my legal options regarding the car damage. On Thursday evening, Mark and I spoke on the phone. Technically, this is property damage, he explained. You could take them to small claims court if they refuse to pay for repairs. You have strong evidence with the dashcam footage, and the fact that they returned the car without disclosing the damage shows bad faith. I don't want to sue my family, I said, feeling uncomfortable. I understand. But sometimes, knowing your legal rights gives you leverage in these situations. What I would recommend is drafting a formal demand letter. It shows you're serious without immediately escalating to legal action. Mark helped me draft a letter requesting payment for the full repair cost within 30 days, citing the relevant laws regarding property damage and unauthorized use, since Haley wasn't permitted to drive my car. Having this in my back pocket made me feel more prepared. That night, I sat down and wrote out boundaries for the first time in my life, what I would and wouldn't accept from my family going forward. 1. I would not accept responsibility for damage I didn't cause. 2. I would not accept being lied to or having my feelings dismissed. 3. I would not continue to be the family safety net without reciprocity and respect. 4. I would not attend family events where different standards applied to me versus Haley. It felt empowering to see these boundaries in writing. Laura helped me rehearse what I would say at the family dinner, preparing for the emotional manipulation tactics my family typically used: guilt, minimization, deflection, and appeals to family loyalty. They're going to try to make you feel like you're overreacting, Laura warned. Don't let them. Stay calm, stick to the facts, and be clear about your expectations. What if they refuse to pay? I asked, voicing my biggest fear. Then you'll have a choice to make, she said gently. Continue as things have always been, or show them there are consequences for treating you this way. By Saturday night, I had everything prepared. My evidence folder, my written demand, and a script of key points I wanted to make sure I covered. I felt nervous but resolved. For most of my life, I'd avoided confrontation with my family, always choosing peace over principle. But the peace had been one-sided, and the principles had always been sacrificed by me, never them. As Sunday approached, I felt an unexpected sense of calm. Whatever happened at this dinner, I knew I was standing up for myself in a way I should have done years ago. The damaged car had become a symbol of something much larger: my damaged self-respect. And for once, I was determined to repair both. Sunday arrived with a nervous energy I couldn't shake. I arrived at my parents' house at 5 p.m. sharp, evidence folder tucked into my bag, determination steeled in my chest. Dad answered the door, his usual jovial smile replaced with cautious apprehension. "Megan, glad you could make it," he said, as if I hadn't been the one to suggest this dinner in the first place. Mom was in the kitchen, finishing up the meal pot roast, my favorite, which I recognized as a peace offering of sorts. Haley sat at the dining table with her twins, Aiden and Emma, helping them with the puzzle. Everyone looked up when I entered, the tension in the room palpable. "Hi, everyone," I said, forcing a calm I didn't entirely feel. I had decided not to bring up the car issue immediately, to let the initial awkwardness dissipate over dinner first. "Aunt Megan!" Emma ran over to hug me, innocent to the adult tension surrounding us. Aiden waved shyly from the table. For the next hour, we engaged in carefully neutral conversation as we ate. The weather, the twins' school projects, Dad's garden. Nothing of substance, nothing controversial. Mom kept refilling wine glasses, perhaps hoping to smooth over the inevitable confrontation. I stuck to water. I needed a clear head for what was coming. After dinner, as Mom served dessert, I caught Dad glancing nervously at his watch. "Something wrong, Dad?" I asked. No, just checking the time. There's a game on later." Of course there was. There was always a reason to cut conversations short when they might become uncomfortable. "Well, before everyone gets busy with other things, I'd like to talk about why I asked for this dinner," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Mom's smile faltered. Haley suddenly became very interested in helping the twins with their ice cream. I think we all know this is about the car, I continued, but it's actually about much more than that. I pulled out my laptop and connected it to their TV using an HDMI cable I'd brought along. "What are you doing?" Mom asked, her voice tinged with worry. "I want to show you something." The dashcam footage began to play on the screen. The accident itself, the impact, Haley's cursing, the inspection of the damage. And most damning of all, the conversation afterward, where they explicitly decided to hide it from me. Haley's face flushed red. Dad looked down at his hands. Mom had tears in her eyes. When the video ended, I opened my folder and placed the repair estimates on the table. 3 separate quotes, I said evenly. The average is $4,318. "Megan, we've already discussed," Dad began. "No, we haven't discussed anything," I interrupted. "You offered $500 for over $4,000 worth of damage that occurred because you broke multiple promises. Haley drove my car after you all agreed she wouldn't. She damaged it while texting and driving, which is illegal, by the way. And instead of telling me right away, you all decided to hide it." "I said I was sorry about that," Haley interjected defensively. "No, actually, you didn't," I corrected her. "Your exact text was, 'Sorry you're so upset about a little scratch.' That's not an apology for what you did. It's minimizing my completely reasonable reaction." "It's still just a car," Mom said quietly. "Material things can be replaced." I took a deep breath. "This isn't about the car. It's about how you treat me versus how you treat Haley. It's about years of different standards and expectations." I pulled out my spreadsheet next. "In the past year alone, you've given Haley over $15,000 in loans that we all know will never be repaid. Last month, you gave her $5,000 for essential bills while she was posting about shopping sprees and concert tickets on Instagram." Haley's eyes widened. "You've been stalking my social media? It's public, Haley. And that's not the point. The point is, when I have a legitimate need fixing damage that your daughter caused to my property, suddenly $500 is all you can manage." Dad shifted uncomfortably. "Our financial situation is complicated, Megan. We help both of our daughters. Do you?" I slid the spreadsheet across the table because, according to my records, the last significant financial help you gave me was $1,000 per semester for college, which was a quarter of what you gave Haley for the school she dropped out of. "That's different," Mom protested. "Haley needed more help because she's less responsible, less capable. Why does my stability get punished while her chaos gets rewarded?" The room fell silent. I could see my words landing, perhaps for the first time. "Look," I continued, softening my tone slightly. "I'm not asking for handouts. I've always made my own way. What I'm asking for is fairness, honesty, and respect. What happened with my car represents none of those things." I pulled out the formal demand letter Mark had helped me draft. "This is a formal request for payment for the full repair cost of $4,318. I'm giving you 30 days to pay this amount. If you choose not to, I will be pursuing other options, including small claims court." The shock on their faces was immediate. "You would sue your own family?" Mom gasped. "I would hold the people who damaged my property accountable," I corrected, "just like I would with anyone else." "This is ridiculous," Haley exploded, finally dropping her uncharacteristically quiet demeanor. "You've always been jealous of me, always keeping score, always acting so perfect and responsible while making me look bad." "I've never had to make you look bad, Haley. You've done that all on your own. See? This is exactly what I mean. You think you're so much better than me." "I don't think I'm better than you. I just think I deserve to be treated with the same consideration you receive automatically." Dad tried to mediate. "Let's all calm down. Megan, surely we can work something out without legal threats." "I've tried working things out for years, Dad. It hasn't worked. So now we're doing this differently. You have 30 days to decide what kind of relationship you want with me going forward." "Are you threatening to cut us off?" Mom asked tearfully. "I'm setting boundaries," I said firmly. "For the first time in my life, I'm telling you what I need to maintain a healthy relationship with this family. What you do with that information is up to you." The room fell into a tense silence. The twins, sensing the mood, had stopped eating their dessert, and were watching with wide eyes. I hadn't wanted to have this confrontation in front of them, but in a way, it seemed fitting. They were witnessing something I wished I'd seen as a child, someone standing up against unfairness, even when it was uncomfortable. I had said everything I needed to say. The evidence was clear, my position was reasonable, and for once, I wasn't backing down. The next move was theirs. As the silence stretched uncomfortably in the room, a small voice suddenly broke through the tension. "Grandma, Grandpa, Aunt Megan is right. Mom did crash the car," and then everyone said not to tell. All heads turned toward Aiden, who was looking down at his half-eaten ice cream, his small shoulders hunched as if expecting backlash for speaking up. "Aiden," Haley hissed, "this is grown-up business, but you always tell us lying is wrong," he persisted, his voice gaining a bit of confidence. "You said we should take responsibility when we make mistakes." Emma nodded beside her brother. "I remember too. At the gas station, Mom was looking at her phone and hit the pole thing. Then everyone said it would be our secret." Haley's face flushed crimson. "Kids, that's enough." "Why is it enough?" I asked gently. "They're just telling the truth, something the adults in this room seem to have trouble with." "Don't use my children against me," Haley snapped. "I'm not using them against you. They're speaking up on their own because they've been taught that honesty matters. At least in theory." Aiden looked up at me, then at his mother. "I don't understand why we couldn't just tell Aunt Megan what happened. When I broke Tommy's action figure at school, you made me tell him right away and say sorry." The simple logic of a child cut through all the adult justifications and excuses. In that moment, I could see something shift in my father's expression, a dawning realization of the double standard we'd been modeling for the next generation. Dad cleared his throat and placed his napkin on the table. "The boy's right." "Richard," Mom started, but he held up his hand. "No, Barbara, the boy is right. What kind of example are we setting here?" He turned to me, his expression more serious than I'd seen it in years. "Megan, I owe you an apology. A real one. Not just for the car, but for a lot of things, it seems." The unexpected support from my father, who had always been Haley's biggest defender, stunned everyone into silence. Even Haley seemed caught off guard. "We should have told you right away about the accident," he continued, "and we should have taken full responsibility for the repairs. That was wrong of us." Mom dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. "I suppose we have been a bit blind to certain patterns." Haley sat rigid in her chair, looking trapped. The twins watched her expectantly. Finally, her shoulders slumped. "Fine. Yes. I crashed your car, Megan. I was driving when I shouldn't have been. I was on my phone when I shouldn't have been, and then I convinced everyone to hide it from you." She took a deep breath. "And it wasn't the first time I've done something like that." It was possibly the most honest thing I'd ever heard my sister say. "I'm sorry," she added, and for once, it sounded genuine. Emma reached over and patted her mother's hand. "It's okay, Mommy. Saying sorry makes it better." A smile tugged at my lips despite everything. "Not completely better," I clarified gently. "Saying sorry is just the first step." "I know," Haley said, surprising me again. "Look, I can't pay for all the repairs right now, but I can contribute something. Maybe we could work out a payment plan?" Before I could respond, Dad spoke up. "No, I'll cover the full repair cost, Megan. You shouldn't have to pay a cent for damage you didn't cause. And Haley," he turned to my sister, "you and I will work out a plan for you to repay me over time. Real repayment, not like the other loans that we've let slide." Mom looked startled at Dad's firm stance, but she nodded in agreement. After the kids were settled in the living room with a movie, Haley asked if we could speak privately. We stepped out onto the back porch, the evening air cool against my skin. "I feel like I should hate you right now," she said, leaning against the railing. "For making me look bad, for bringing up all that financial stuff in front of everyone." "But you don't?" I asked cautiously. She shook her head. "No, I'm mostly embarrassed. And maybe a little relieved? I don't know." She paused. "The truth is, I've always been jealous of you, Megan." "Jealous? Of me?" I couldn't hide my surprise. "You're the one everyone bends over backward for." "Yeah, because they think I'll fall apart if they don't," she said bitterly. They think I'm incapable. Meanwhile, you've got your life together. Good job, nice apartment, new car at least before I damaged it. She attempted a weak smile. You don't need anyone to rescue you. That doesn't mean I don't need support sometimes, I said quietly. Or recognition. Or just basic respect. I know. I get that now, she hesitated. For what it's worth, I am sorry. About the car, about all of it. I've been seeing a therapist, actually. Just started last month. You have? This was news to me. Yeah. I've been realizing I've got some issues to work through. About responsibility. About how I relate to people. She looked out into the darkening yard. Hearing Aiden call me out like that tonight, it hit me hard. I don't want my kids growing up thinking it's okay to lie when things get tough, or that rules don't apply to them. For the first time in years, maybe ever, Haley and I were having a real conversation. Not one where she was asking for something, or I was restraining my frustration, but an honest exchange between sisters. I'm glad you're getting help, I said sincerely. It's a start, she replied. I've got a lot to work on. As we stood there in the growing dusk, I realized that the car accident, as frustrating and expensive as it was, had forced a long overdue reckoning in our family. Sometimes it takes something breaking on the outside to fix what's broken on the inside. 2 weeks after the family dinner, my car sat in the body shop undergoing repairs. True to his word, Dad had written a check for the full amount, even covering the additional costs that emerged once the technicians got a closer look at the damage. There had been no complaints, no attempts to negotiate the price down, just a straightforward acceptance of responsibility. The repair process for our family relationships, however, was proving more complex than fixing a dented bumper and cracked taillight, but progress was happening there too. Dad had called me 3 days after the dinner, asking if we could meet for coffee. We sat at a quiet corner table in my favorite cafe, steam rising from our mugs as he searched for the right words. I've been doing a lot of thinking, he began, turning his cup slowly between his hands. About what you said. About the favoritism. He looked up at me, his eyes reflecting genuine regret. I didn't see it, Megan. Or maybe I didn't want to see it. It's been going on for as long as I can remember, I said gently. He nodded. Your mother and I talked about it all night after you left. We went through that spreadsheet you made. The numbers don't lie, he sighed deeply. We thought we were just giving Haley what she needed. But in the process, we took you for granted. Because I didn't cause problems, I concluded. Exactly. You were always so capable, so self-sufficient. We didn't worry about you. But that doesn't mean I didn't need you sometimes, I said, the hurt of years creeping into my voice despite my efforts to keep it steady. I know that now, he acknowledged, reaching across the table to cover my hand with his. And I'm sorry, Megan. Truly sorry. That conversation was the first of many. Mom had invited me to lunch the following weekend, her own attempt at reconciliation. Unlike Dad, she struggled more to acknowledge the favoritism, initially framing it as different children having different needs. But as we talked, recalling specific incidents from my childhood and comparing them to how Haley had been treated in similar situations, understanding began to dawn in her eyes. I never meant to hurt you, she whispered, dabbing at tears. I just worried about Haley so much. I know you didn't mean to, I assured her. But intent doesn't change the impact it had on me. No, it doesn't, she agreed. I want to do better, Megan. I want to be a better mother to both my daughters. Haley's path to change was more complicated. She had continued with therapy, and we'd had several conversations where glimpses of genuine reflection broke through her usual defensiveness. She'd even surprised me by bringing over a homemade dinner one evening, something she'd never done before. I'm not a great cook, she warned as she unpacked the containers of slightly overcooked pasta and garlic bread. But I wanted to do something for you without being asked. It was a small gesture, but significant in what it represented. The most concrete evidence of change came when Haley borrowed my measuring tape for a home project and returned it the very next day, without me having to ask, in the same condition she'd received it. When I texted to thank her, her response was simple. New leaf, remember? I had established clear boundaries with all of them. No more last-minute expectations that I would drop everything to help with Haley's emergencies. No more unequal treatment at family gatherings. No more assumptions that I would understand when plans were changed to accommodate Haley's whims. And most importantly, no more dishonesty. To my surprise, these boundaries were largely being respected. There had been a few slips, old habits die hard, but each time, a gentle reminder was all it took to get us back on track. We had our first post-confrontation family gathering for Dad's birthday 2 weeks after the dinner. The difference was subtle but unmistakable. Mom made sure to ask about my recent work project with the same interest she showed in Haley's new photography gig. Dad made a point of publicly thanking me for the thoughtful gift I'd gotten him, rather than just focusing on Haley's contribution. Haley herself seemed more restrained, less inclined to make everything about her. It wasn't perfect. Decades of established dynamics don't change overnight, but it was progress. As I picked up my repaired car from the body shop, running my hand over the now flawless bumper, I reflected on how sometimes the most painful incidents can lead to necessary healing. The accident had forced issues into the open that had been simmering below the surface for years. It had given me the push I needed to finally stand up for myself and demand the respect I deserved. I drove home, enjoying the smooth ride and unblemished appearance of my SUV. When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed a small package on my front step. Inside was a keychain with a tiny dashcam charm and a note in Haley's handwriting. "Thanks for the wake-up call. Some crashes are worth having if they help you change direction." I smiled, attaching it to my keys. Our family still had a long road ahead, with likely bumps along the way. But for the first time in years, it felt like we were all driving in the same direction, with a shared map and a clearer understanding of the journey. The damaged car had indeed revealed the cracks in our family foundation, but instead of crumbling under the pressure, we were finally beginning the work of repair. And unlike my bumper, which now looked as if nothing had ever happened, our family relationships would always bear the marks of our history. But perhaps those marks would serve as important reminders of the lessons we'd learned along the way. Sometimes it takes a broken bumper to fix a broken family. And while both repairs cost something, one in money, the other in emotional honesty, both were investments worth making. Has your family ever had a moment that forced you to address long-standing issues? Or have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who took you for granted? Share your experiences in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you handled similar situations. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life family stories and lessons learned the hard way. Your support means everything to me as I continue sharing these personal experiences. Thank you for being part of this journey with me. And remember, sometimes standing up for yourself is the most loving thing you can do, both for yourself and for those who need to grow.